to get into. These would be 25% tariffs on all Japanese and South Korean exports into the U.S.
To see how these tariffs will impact Japan and Americans buying cars.
I'm sitting above water on the car I have, but then I was like, with prices going up, I have huge concerns about the tariffs and all the different ways that prices are going to go up, not just as related to...
Once, Toyota and Honda were more than car brands in America. They were symbols of stability, middle-class opportunity, and towns that thrived on steady shifts and full parking lots. Their factories across Ohio, Alabama, and other states represented paychecks that sustained families and entire communities. Today, that image is cracking. Conversations inside these plants have shifted from growth and job security to rumors, warnings, and contingency plans. Nearly 20 U.S. facilities and more than 55,000 workers now form a fragile ecosystem tied directly to decisions being made in Tokyo. New tariffs, rising costs, and turbulent U.S. debt markets are forcing executives to consider moving production to Mexico or Southeast Asia in search of stability. This is more than economics. It's a symbol of something deeper. When companies that helped rebuild American manufacturing after the industrial crises of the 1980s begin weighing their exit, the picture is haunting. Silent assembly lines, cafeterias without workers, and towns losing the steady rhythm of the auto industry. The question practically asks itself, is this the beginning of a new Rust Belt, not forged by the collapse of steel, but by the retreat of the car industry itself? The impact would not stop at Toyota or Honda's gates. A tariff wall designed to protect American jobs now threatens to erase them. It starts with the 55,000 employees inside those plants, but the damage could cascade. The auto sector is held together by suppliers, logistics firms, dealerships, and service providers. Analysts warn that if Toyota and Honda scale back U.S. production, nearly 400,000 additional jobs could vanish in the supply chain that feeds these factories. From tool and die shops in Michigan to trucking firms in Texas, the collapse would spread like falling dominoes. And then there's the market itself. The American auto sector generates roughly $170 billion in sales each year. If consumers pull back because of soaring prices and fewer choices, that figure could shrink sharply, pushing entire states toward recession. For Detroit, already fragile after decades of competition and restructuring, this is not a contest, it's a fracture. U.S. automakers now face uneven ground in a market splintered by tariffs, foreign exits, and rising production costs. The stakes go beyond cars and jobs. Japan holds another card, one far more powerful than any assembly line. While Washington imposes tariffs, Tokyo quietly holds $1.13 trillion in U.S. Treasury bonds, making Japan America's largest foreign lender and owner of over 12% of all federal debt. That position gives Tokyo leverage no automaker alone could wield. In early May, Japan's finance minister hinted these holdings might not always remain untouchable. If Tokyo sold even 5 or 6% of its bond stockpile, yields on 10-year U.S. Treasury notes could spike by 30 to 45 basis points. That seemingly technical move would have real-world consequences, higher borrowing costs for everyone. Mortgage rates hovering near 4 to 5% could jump closer to 6%, adding hundreds of dollars to monthly household payments. What starts as a tariff dispute over cars could end with financial aftershocks rattling every kitchen table in America. The pain is not theoretical, it's already here. Tariffs promoted as a patriotic shield to protect domestic industry have become an invisible tax collected at the checkout counter. Car prices have surged almost overnight as added costs are passed directly to buyers. Import costs rose by 4 to 5%, pushing core inflation higher by 0.3 to 0.4 percentage points. Those numbers may sound small on paper, but they translate into tough choices in real life. Families already struggling with rent, groceries, and healthcare now have to delay buying a car, cut other expenses, or take on more debt just to keep moving. Higher auto loan rates compound the problem. Americans are facing steeper repayment schedules not only for cars, but also for student loans, credit cards, and other forms of borrowing. The cost of credit is climbing across the board, hitting households far beyond the auto market. For the middle class, this means paying more simply to stand still, more for the same car, the same education, the same daily necessities. The psychological toll is as heavy as a financial one. Young buyers, once a symbol of optimism and upward mobility, are holding off on purchasing their first cars, worried about taking on debt they can't control. Families planning to upgrade to safer, more efficient vehicles are keeping aging cars on the road, absorbing higher maintenance bills and safety risks rather than facing punishing sticker prices. What should have been a story of economic security has become one of sacrifice and retreat. The bill for tariffs is arriving, not in Washington, but at every American kitchen table. It shows up in car prices, in rising loan rates, and in the uncertainty hanging over communities built around these factories. Protectionism promised stability. Instead, it threatens to deliver silence in places once alive with the hum of assembly lines and the hope of a steady paycheck. America is not bearing the cost of tariff alone. What begins in U.S. factories and households quickly spreads across borders, shaking the foundations of the global auto industry. Within months, worldwide losses have reached an estimated $12 billion, damage no single market can contain. Japanese automakers are hit hardest. Analysts warn that 5 major brands combined could lose as much as $25 billion annually, with Toyota alone absorbing nearly half that blow. Even the strongest companies are vulnerable when tariffs fracture supply chains and force sudden recalculations of cost and strategy. American firms are suffering as well. General Motors reports its costs have jumped by $4 billion to $5 billion, while Subaru estimates losses of $2.5 billion. For companies already operating on thin margins, these aren't just financial setbacks, they're existential threats. At the core of the crisis lies a global supply chain trapped in perpetual gridlock. Ports slow under redirected shipments, warehouses overflow with unsent parts, and factories sit idle waiting for deliveries that never arrive. The arteries of global manufacturing are clogged, and each delay deepens the damage. Yet not every Japanese automaker is rushing to abandon the United States. Beneath the headlines of potential withdrawal, a quieter debate is unfolding. Can these companies survive inside America by adapting to tariff walls rather than fleeing them? Honda once set an ambitious goal, producing 90% of the vehicles it sells in the U.S. domestically. To meet it, executives considered shifting models like the CR-V from Canada and the HR-V from Mexico into American plants. On paper, these moves could blunt tariffs and reassure Washington that Honda remains committed to U.S. production. Toyota has explored similar strategies, contemplating long-term investments to preserve market share and buy political goodwill. A bet that American demand for cars will eventually overcome protectionist barriers. But optimism collides with harsh reality. Rising costs, unpredictable trade policy, and financial instability make every calculation uncertain. Deepening roots in American soil might protect today's sales, but risk tomorrow's collapse if the ground shifts again. For Japanese automakers, the question is no longer just where to build cars. It's whether America itself remains a safe place to invest. The tariff storm has done more than dent sales. It has fractured the foundations of American manufacturing. Detroit, long the beating heart of U.S. automaking, now finds itself squeezed between tariff walls, rising raw material costs, and the retreat of foreign investment. What was once a symbol of resilience now resembles a fault line in a crumbling system. Small businesses that form the invisible scaffolding of the auto economy, parts suppliers, logistics firms, maintenance contractors, are confronting cascading bankruptcies. Each closure triggers another, hollowing out entire counties as workshops shutter and order books dry up. The shock is not purely industrial, it is deeply social. Communities built around the rhythm of the factory shift are unraveling. Skilled workers see livelihoods disappear overnight. Younger generations, watching the uncertainty, quietly turn away from manufacturing careers, seeking jobs in technology or services that may be less secure but at least seem more stable. This slow bleed raises a grim possibility. America could lose not just factories, but also the skilled human capital that once gave its industry an edge. Industry leaders call this an internal fracture, a splintering of the auto sector under its own contradictions. Companies are divided, lobbying for conflicting solutions. Some demand deeper government protection. Others plan an exit from the U.S. market altogether. Without coherence, the sector risks collapsing in pieces rather than uniting against global competition. For decades, the auto industry has been more than a business. It has been a cultural anchor, a source of national pride, and a pillar of the economy worth hundreds of billions of dollars. Now that pillar sways under pressures that are political as they are economic. The unsettling question is no longer whether the system is under stress. It is whether it can hold it all. From Detroit to Tokyo, From the White House to bond markets, the shockwaves of tariffs now reverberate worldwide. The United States is left carrying the weight of unemployment, inflation, and the threat of vanishing investment. Japan, meanwhile, holds a financial trigger. Its $1.13 trillion in U.S. Treasury bonds gives Tokyo leverage powerful enough to shake the dollar itself. What was once an alliance rooted in shared security had become a battlefield of economic pressure, where trust is traded for tactics. The world watches as America confronts a sobering dilemma. Are tariffs truly a shield of protection, or a ticking time bomb placed under its own economy? If protectionism is meant to defend a nation, what happens when it becomes a weapon that weakens it from within? The strategy once promised security. Now it threatens to dismantle the very stability it was meant to preserve.